Imagine stepping into a world where your very presence, your words, your hopes, and your dreams all drift before the eyes of others, yet remain unseen. A world where the color of your skin renders you both hypervisible and completely invisible. Welcome to Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, a powerful, haunting novel set primarily in the early 20th century United States, where the social landscape is shaped by the lingering legacy of slavery, the push and pull of northern and southern sensibilities, and the uncertain future of racial identity in modern America. Our protagonist, whose name we never learn, stands at the center of this swirling vortex of expectations and betrayals, trying to carve out his own identity in a society that refuses to see him as a full, autonomous human being. The story opens not on a sunny, hopeful morning, but in near-total darkness, except for 1,369 electric light bulbs blazing in a cramped underground hole. Here, the narrator, the so-called Invisible Man, has taken refuge from a hostile world. He's literally beneath the streets of New York City, living like a phantom in a hidden space that he's illegally wired for electricity. This clandestine refuge becomes his personal think tank, a secret laboratory of memory and reflection, where he can look back on the long, twisted road that brought him to this point. He begins to tell us his tale, transporting us back in time to the early days of his life in the American South. We find him as a young, bright, and idealistic black student. He's been raised to believe that if he works hard, respects the rules, and stays polite, he'll be rewarded with opportunities and recognition. And at first, it appears to be true. He's been invited to give a speech in front of a gathering of the town's leading white citizens. He's elated at this chance. His speech, focused on humility and social responsibility, is sure to impress these pillars of the community. But when he arrives, he's startled by the bizarre and brutal spectacle that unfolds. Before he can speak, he is forced to participate in a battle royale, a savage boxing match where he and other young black men, blindfolded and terrified, must fight each other for the amusement of the white crowd. It's a humiliating and painful ordeal, complete with electrocuted rugs covered in fake gold coins intended to make these young men scramble and suffer. By the time the narrator finally delivers his speech, bloodied and shaken, the white men barely pay attention to his earnest words. Nonetheless, he's awarded a scholarship to a prestigious black college. It's a hollow triumph, delivered as if it were a prize for surviving a sadistic game. With this scholarship, he heads off to a respected black college set in the lush green heart of the South. Here, the narrator idolizes the college's president, Dr. Bledsoe, and strives to impress him. He's learned to speak the language of Booker T, Washington-esque accommodation, believing that by showing himself intelligent, humble, and hardworking, he can rise above prejudice. One afternoon, he's assigned to drive a wealthy white trustee of the college, a man named Mr. Norton, around the countryside. This car ride, meant to be a simple errand, quickly turns into a dangerous detour. Seeking to impress Mr. Norton, the narrator inadvertently takes him to a poor area where they encounter the disturbing story of Jim Trueblood, a black man accused of incest with his own daughter. Norton, horrified and yet perversely fascinated, presses the narrator for more insight and soon becomes distressed and overwhelmed by the encounter. In a panic, the narrator stops at the Golden Day, a ramshackle tavern and brothel that's supposed to provide relief for the trustee. Instead, chaos ensues. Among the strange, unruly group of patrons, Black World War I veterans who are mentally unstable, prostitutes, drunks, the trustee nearly collapses. It's a scene of wild disorder, and the narrator is deeply shaken. He's certain he's let everyone down. Dr. Bledsoe, furious that one of the white trustees has been exposed to the rougher, uglier side of black life near the campus, accuses the narrator of carelessness and stupidity. In a pivotal moment, the narrator learns that Dr. Bledsoe's polished veneer hides a deeply cynical philosophy. It's all a game of deception and manipulation. Bledsoe doesn't care about the truth. He cares about pleasing white benefactors and maintaining his position of influence. He's willing to lie, betray his own students, and distort the truth if it keeps the money flowing and the power structure intact. Bledsoe expels the narrator, but pretends to help by giving him letters of recommendation to important men in New York, implying that if he proves himself there, he can return to school. With shattered illusions, the narrator boards a bus northward, hopeful that New York will offer a fresh start, an environment where his worth can be judged more fairly. The city greets him with a jostling mix of opportunity and indifference. Dressed in his best suit, armed with Bledsoe's letters of reference, he goes from office to office, trying to meet the wealthy connections that his former mentor promised would help. Days turn to weeks, and each letter leads to polite rejections or condescending advice. Eventually, he learns a crushing truth. Dr. Bledsoe's letters were sabotage, warning these northern benefactors to keep him away and under no circumstances offer him assistance. The narrator's trust is broken again. The world he thought he understood, where merit and obedience were rewarded, proves to be a cruel illusion. Desperate for work, the narrator takes a job in a paint factory, one famous for its pure, bright white paint. The company's slogan brags about keeping America clean and pure, an unsettling metaphor for racial attitudes. In the factory, he is assigned to a man named Lucius Brockway, an old black worker fiercely proud of his role in making the paint's secret formula. Brockway is paranoid, suspicious that the narrator wants his job. Misunderstandings erupt, culminating in a confrontation that leaves the narrator dazed. A boiler explosion knocks him unconscious. When he wakes, he finds himself in a mysterious hospital ward deep within the factory complex, subjected to experimental electric shock treatments. The doctors speak over him as though he isn't there, discussing him like a specimen, erasing his identity and memory. They treat him as a disposable body, a blank slate upon which they perform experiments. When he finally emerges, it's as if he's been reborn, stripped of old illusions, but also robbed of a certain naive innocence. Wandering the bustling streets of Harlem in search of meaning, the narrator encounters Mary, a warm and maternal black woman who offers him a home and encourages him to find his purpose. With her, he feels cared for, if still directionless. One day, witnessing an elderly black couple being evicted onto the street, the narrator delivers an impassioned speech to the assembled crowd. Stirring and heartfelt, this spontaneous oration energizes the bystanders and nearly sparks a riot against the eviction. In that moment, he discovers a hidden talent. He has a voice. He can move people. This demonstration of rhetorical power catches the eye of representatives from a mysterious political organization known as the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood presents itself as a multiracial, forward-thinking group dedicated to social justice and uplifting the oppressed. Intrigued, flattered, and hungry for purpose, the narrator joins their ranks. They groom him, train him in public speaking, and give him a new name and a sense of importance. He's assigned to work in Harlem, leading rallies and addressing community concerns. At first, this feels like a homecoming for his soul. Here, at last, is a group that sees him, values his talents, and offers him structure and meaning. He quickly rises in prominence, becoming a celebrated speaker who can draw large, enthusiastic crowds. Yet, cracks soon appear in the Brotherhood's facade. Far from being a pure organization fighting for justice, it's rife with internal politics, hidden agendas, and ideological rigidity. The narrator is scolded for showing too much individual initiative, reminded constantly that he must follow the group's abstract doctrines rather than respond organically to the community's immediate needs. He finds himself at odds with Brother Jack, the organization's stern, one-eyed leader, who treats people like pawns on a chessboard. Even as the narrator's reputation grows, he senses that he's little more than a convenient tool for a cause whose ultimate goals remain murky. A turning point comes with the character Todd Clifton, a charismatic young black member of the Brotherhood and a friend to the narrator. Clifton disappears mysteriously from the organization. When the narrator finally finds him, Clifton is on a Harlem street corner, no longer a passionate activist, but reduced to selling dancing Sambo dolls, grotesque caricatures that play to the worst racist stereotypes. Before the narrator can fully understand what has happened to his friend, events take a tragic turn. A white policeman confronts Clifton and, without warning, shoots him dead. The narrator is left holding the lifeless body of a man who once believed in collective action and racial uplift. In this shocking moment of violence, all the Brotherhood's theoretical, high-minded rhetoric collapses into the raw, brutal reality of black life in America. The narrator organizes a funeral march for Clifton, delivering a powerful eulogy that honors his friend's humanity and questions the society that allowed his needless death. The Brotherhood, however, is not pleased. Rather than commend the narrator's compassion and leadership, they chastise him for deviating from the party line. They accuse him of showboating and emotionalism. It's here that the narrator fully understands that the Brotherhood's supposed fight for equality and justice is rooted in manipulation. They care more about abstract ideologies and the control of the narrative than the real suffering on the streets. He realizes he's never been seen as an individual. He's been a mouthpiece, a mannequin dressed up in noble words. Deeply disillusioned, the narrator tries to navigate Harlem's political and social minefield on his own terms. He dons various disguises, trying to understand the factionalism and betrayals happening around him. He meets Ras the Exhorter, later Ras the Destroyer, a West Indian black nationalist who preaches violent uprising against white oppression and denounces the Brotherhood as too conciliatory and manipulative. Ras sees the narrator as a traitor to the race, a puppet controlled by white interests. In the ensuing tension, Harlem becomes a pressure cooker. Rumors swirl, tempers flare, and the narrator finds himself caught in the crossfire of competing ideologies. He's lost his faith in the Brotherhood and never embraced Ras's militant extremism. Once again, he's searching for a path that truly respects his individuality and his people's humanity. As the narrator sinks deeper into confusion, a curious episode occurs. Brother Jack, in a heated confrontation, loses his glass eye, literally showing that he has had only a single, limited vision all along. The narrator sees that all the Brotherhood's talk of scientific planning and historical necessity was just another form of blindness. He understands that he's been invisible to them too, not seen for who he is, only for how he can serve their ends. In his desperation for clarity and connection, the narrator returns to old haunts. He attempts to reconnect with Mary, who once provided comfort and stability. He experiments with new identities, wearing a dark pair of sunglasses that cause strangers to mistake him for a man named Reinhardt, a chameleon-like figure who seems to be everywhere and nowhere at once. A gambler, a preacher, a lover, a con man. This case of mistaken identity shows the narrator how fluid identity can be, how easily people project onto him what they want to see. It's a dizzying revelation. He could be anyone, as long as people never really look at him. The world is full of Reinhardts, invisible men passing through various roles, seen only in pieces, never as whole individuals. As tensions reach a boiling point, Harlem erupts into a full-scale riot. The narrator wanders through a nightmarish landscape of burning buildings, shattered glass, and screams echoing in the streets. Looters strip storefronts bare. Men and women, angered and confused, lash out at anything that symbolizes oppression. The narrator, trying to make sense of it all, encounters Ras the Destroyer, leading a gang of armed men on horseback like some apocalyptic warlord. Ras demands the narrator's death, calling him a traitor. Armed with a spear, Ras commands chaos. The narrator flees, realizing that all around him social order is collapsing, and no one sees him for who he is. The Brotherhood's manipulations have led to tragedy, Ras's militancy to destruction, and the narrator is trapped in a city on fire, his identity still a mystery even to himself. In the riot's aftermath, chased by pursuers and nearly killed, the narrator falls into a manhole, the literal step in an underground invisibility. Stumbling through the darkness, he finds himself cut off from the chaos above. Here, in the quiet, subterranean void, he finally comes to terms with his invisibility. This is not just a physical invisibility, but the metaphorical kind that has followed him all his life. The expectations of white trustees, the deceit of Dr. Bledsoe, the exploitation by the Brotherhood, the racial stereotypes. These forces have all refused to see his humanity. Instead, they saw him as a novelty, a spokesman, a threat, a tool, a scapegoat, or a symbol, but never as a full person with his own dreams and complexities. Now we circle back to where we began. The narrator in his underground lair, lighting up his space with an outrageous number of bulbs, powered by electricity he steals from the city's grid. Here, he reflects on the journey that brought him beneath the streets. He hasn't given up on life. Instead, he's in a chrysalis stage, contemplating his experiences and identity. The novel's ending doesn't offer an easy resolution. Instead, it delivers a powerful message. Before the narrator can re-enter society, he needs to understand himself, his history, and the systems that seek to define him. He's invisible not because he lacks substance, but because the world is unwilling or unprepared to truly see him. The narrator himself is a fascinating figure, never named, perpetually searching for an identity. At the start, he's the model student, eager to please and impress. He believes in the American dream, in the promises of education, humility, and hard work. Throughout his journey, though, he's let down by every institutional authority he respects. His transformation is slow and painful. He peels away layers of naive optimism, learns to distrust those in power, and finally arrives at a place of wary self-awareness. By the end, he's someone who understands that the key to freedom lies in acknowledging the complexity of his own identity, even if that means embracing the notion of invisibility as a starting point rather than an endpoint. Dr. Bledsoe, the college president, initially appears as a self-made success story, a black leader running a prestigious institution. But we quickly learn that Bledsoe's success is built on deceit. He is a gatekeeper willing to crush young, promising black minds if it means maintaining his own position of privilege. He's an embodiment of betrayal from within one's own community, showing how oppression can be internalized and turned against the vulnerable. Mr. Norton, the white trustee, is a symbol of paternalistic benevolence gone wrong. He sees the black college students as part of his own destiny, his philanthropic legacy. Yet his curiosity is voyeuristic. He's shocked and titillated by the misery of True Blood's story, and ultimately he's too fragile to face the truth of the world he claims to be helping. His discomfort and eventual abandonment highlight how white patronage often serves the ego of the benefactor more than the real needs of those supposedly being helped. The Brotherhood's key figure, Brother Jack, presents a cold, intellectual approach to social activism. He's interested in theories, historical inevitabilities, and controlling the narrative. He plucks the narrator from obscurity not out of respect for his talents, but as part of a larger strategy to influence Harlem. Jack and the Brotherhood stand for the danger of ideological extremism, where individuals become cogs in a machine rather than cherished, autonomous contributors. Todd Clifton is a tragic figure. Once a charismatic young activist full of potential, he becomes disillusioned and drops out of the struggle. His selling of Sambo dolls suggests a surrender to cynical despair. When he's gunned down, it's a violent reminder that the world is indifferent to Black life. His death galvanizes the narrator, forcing him to question the Brotherhood's motives and the worth of any group that can't see the human cost beneath their slogans. Ras the Exhorter, later Ras the Destroyer, is the opposite extreme of the Brotherhood. While the Brotherhood buries its racial concerns under Marxist theory and abstraction, Ras embraces race wholeheartedly, calling for direct, violent confrontation. He too fails to see the narrator as an individual. He wants warriors, not nuanced thinkers. Ras's transformation from a passionate exhorter to a destructive force mirrors the riot's shift from righteous anger to chaotic violence. Mary, the warm-hearted woman who shelters the narrator, offers a moral anchor and a sense of community. She's not trying to manipulate him. She feeds him, encourages him, and wants him to find his place and voice. Yet, even Mary is left behind as the narrator plunges into a world where he must face the complexity of power and identity politics. Still, her kindness stands out in a story filled with betrayal. Invisible Man deals heavily with invisibility as a metaphor for racial and individual identity. The narrator's invisibility stems from the refusal of others, white, black, rich, poor, to see him clearly. They see stereotypes, ideologies, or tools instead of a human being. This invisibility parallels the broader social condition of African Americans in a racially stratified society, where visibility often means exposure to harm, and invisibility can mean erasure of personhood. Identity is another central theme. The narrator grapples with who he is supposed to be: the model student, the hopeful applicant, the dutiful employee, the passionate activist, or the cunning chameleon who can slip into a new persona at will. Each role is defined by someone else's expectations, and only when he retreats underground does he begin to define himself on his own terms. Identity in Invisible Man is fluid, not fixed, and must be reclaimed from a world that imposes limiting labels. Power and manipulation run through every page. Dr. Bledsoe wields power by kowtowing to white interests while secretly pulling strings behind the scenes. The Brotherhood wields power through collectivism and ideology, believing that individuals must be sacrificed to the greater good. Ras tries to seize power through brute force and militant rhetoric. Over and over, the narrator is caught in these power struggles, learning that no group has a monopoly on truth or justice. Ultimately, power without empathy and respect reduces people to pawns. There's also the theme of double consciousness, inspired by W.E.B. Du Bois' concept of Black Americans seeing themselves through their own eyes and through the eyes of a racist society. The narrator continually tries to reconcile how he views himself with how others view him. For most of the book, he's trapped by external perceptions. Only at the end does he accept his invisibility and begin forging a self-awareness that transcends the white gaze, the black gatekeepers, and the political manipulators. The South in the novel's opening chapters is lush, green, and full of outwardly genteel manners. But beneath its surface hospitality lies a strict racial hierarchy enforced by violence and humiliation. The genteel surroundings of the Black College are also deceptive. It's a carefully manicured environment designed to impress wealthy white donors rather than cultivate genuine intellectual freedom. New York City, by contrast, bursts onto the page with its noisy streets, its mix of cultures and classes, its promise and peril. Harlem in the novel is a place of Black vitality, art, music, and culture, yet it's also fraught with tensions between moderates and militants, reformers and revolutionaries, poverty and prosperity. Factories churn out paint to whiten the world, and the city's underground, its cellars, basements, and manholes, hints at a hidden dimension of existence beneath the polished veneers of skyscrapers and bright lights. The atmosphere oscillates between hope and despair, aspiration and disillusionment. Parades, rallies, and speeches generate excitement and a sense of forward momentum. But these moments of communal uplift often give way to scenes of violence, betrayal, and confusion. The resultant mood is charged, electric, and at times surreal, especially in scenes like the Golden Day, where the line between sanity and madness blurs. It's easy to feel the narrator's heartbreak when he learns that his beloved mentor, Dr. Bledsoe, has deceived him. We share his humiliation at the Battle Royale, his sense of wonder and confusion as he steps into the bustling streets of Harlem, his shock and grief at Clifton's brutal death, and his terror as he flees from Rass's spear in the riot. The emotional arc follows a young man's journey from faith to cynicism, and finally to a cautious, self-defined understanding. It's not a clean triumph. He doesn't emerge as a celebrated hero, but rather a survivor who has gained the strength to see the world's cruelty without succumbing to it. The narrator's struggle is deeply human. Who hasn't felt misunderstood at some point, or used by others, or forced into a role that doesn't fit? Ellison's masterpiece resonates because it's about more than just one man's journey. It's about the universal human search for visibility and acknowledgement. In the narrator's plight, we see the plight of anyone whose individuality has been flattened into a stereotype or a utility. In his underground sanctuary, powered by stolen electricity and filled with a maddening array of light bulbs, the narrator decides it might be time to come out, to re-enter the world above. He has discovered that invisibility can be both curse and tool. Perhaps by embracing his invisibility, he can learn to define himself rather than be defined by others. He doesn't propose easy answers. Instead, he leaves us with a powerful meditation on identity, perception, and the human need to be seen and known. This is the story Ellison weaves, an odyssey of an unnamed Black man navigating America's racial, political, and social mazes, searching for himself among illusions and manipulations. It's a story where the protagonist's initial trust is shattered, his loyalties tested, and his illusions stripped bare. He stands at the end invisibly illuminated, wiser to the games of power and prejudice, and determined, if not to be fully seen, then at least to see himself clearly. In doing so, Invisible Man invites us to ask, in a world full of distortions and blind spots, how do we learn to see ourselves and others truly? And perhaps most urgently, once we understand our invisibility, how do we step forward into visibility on our own terms? In its frank confrontation with America's social and racial fabric, Invisible Man remains startlingly relevant. The narrator's journey is a timeless exploration of what it means to assert your own identity in a world that wants to script it for you. As he closes his account, still underground, but thinking about emerging. We too are left contemplating the nature of identity and society's refusal to recognize our full humanity. The book is a clarion call to recognize that the struggle for visibility, dignified, honest visibility, is ongoing. The narrator's story does not end with a tidy resolution. It ends with a new awareness and a question, inviting readers to reflect on their own roles in seeing or obscuring the humanity of those around them.